Hello, good morning. Welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation with me, your host, Owen James, a channel that brings you your team every single day. Please make sure you obviously smash that sub for great free content, guys. We don't charge you for content here. We don't hide our stuff behind paywalls. You know, obviously, so please subscribe to the channel. Look, we've got some Vaslav Cerny for you this morning. We've got some Hamza Igman stories for you this morning. And we've got some interesting news around the bans for supporters and the number of supporters who could well be banned for that banner that was neither racist nor discriminatory. And we have proof that it was neither racist nor discriminatory from Police Scotland. Yeah, we're going to talk all those things. We'll obviously get to the banner. We're going to leave that to the very end. For those of you who are sick to death of that, we'll leave that to the very end of the video. So if you want to find out all the latest on that and an incredible number of fans who could be banned for life, which I think is just crazy, we will get to that at the end. Now, we're going to start off with the Vaslav Cerny story. Now, I think there's a lot of people, including myself, got very excited this last night when rumours of a buyout clause emerged. Keith Jackson in the Daily Record, breaking news of an alleged buyout clause, which then obviously, putting that together with, of course, the whole situation around the £1.5 million loan fee, presented an opportunity where we may have only had to pay £4 million to secure the services of Vaslav Cerny. However, with some digging, Rangers Review, probably Chris Jack, who loves pissing on everyone's chips, came and said that there was absolutely no truth in it whatsoever, and there was no buyout clause in his contract. And that obviously means that any transfer fee for the player will be decided by Wolfsburg, external to anything that was agreed with and paid by Rangers. I think that's obviously disappointing news, isn't it? A lot of us were very hopeful that, a bargain price could be struck, that we could get first refusal on Vaslav Cerny. Now, of course, the biggest issue now is that Cerny, once this season is over, he becomes a Wolfsburg player again, and therefore is kind of, if Wolfsburg do want to sell him, which it very much seems that they do want to, he's on the open market and any team can buy him. There's interest from Serie A, there's interest from La Liga, there is interest as well from the English Premier League. Now, the situation was further complicated by Vaslav Cerny's agent, who said that Vaslav wants to move to a top 5 European league. Now, how true that is, I don't know. That seems to be the story that is coming out. Now, this obviously flies in the face of things that Vaslav said, the fact that he seems very much at home in Scotland. He seems to be very much at home at Rangers and enjoys life and enjoys playing for the club. However, it does seem that we are going to be in a Malik Tillman, Abdallah Sima style situation where we could well be priced out of any market. Now, yes, we'll have more money to spend this summer with obviously the 49ers investing and obviously as well any player sales adding to the amount of money we've got to spend. However, it does seem though that even with that extra money, that the fee for Vaslav Cerny could be prohibitive, with Rangers unlikely to want to spend a massive amount of the budget on one player and one player alone, given the fact that there is numerous positions that do need to be addressed. Now, there's been stories going around that the fee could be around 7-8 million, which doesn't seem to be overly prohibitive. There's been other stories that 11 million is what Wolfsburg will be looking for. But if there is Serie A interest, La Liga interest, EPL interest, then obviously you run into a whole set of issues there, because let's face it, at the end of the day, the English Premier League clubs have far more money than we do, as do any of the clubs in the top 5 leagues around Europe, even with the investment from the 49ers. So, there could be a situation where we all have fallen in love with a lone player, and yet again he moves on and leaves at the end of the season, and we have to just get on with it without him. So, there is that situation now. But like I said, you've got to hope that, that Niels Koppen can weave his magic and a deal can be agreed for Vaslav Cerny, even though obviously Cerny doesn't fit the player trading model. But, like I said before, you can't just buy kids. You've got to have an experienced core to your team if you're going to be successful. Right, so that's the story about Vaslav Cerny, and not the story I wanted to report this morning. I did want to report that 5.5 million buyout clause was true and that everything was going to come off and it was all going to be all right. But this is Rangers, guys. What you expecting? Like some sort of, I don't know, some sort of Tim Burton-esque movie. There's always a dark side to it, isn't there? Now let's move on and talk a little bit of Hamza Igman. Now, according to reports on a number of sources down here in England, Everton, who are nouveau riche now with the Friedkin Group money, and obviously will be able to pay us the Patterson money they owe us, are now looking to strengthen their squad this summer. Now, Everton have had a pretty dire season, although it has improved in recent times under David Moyes. Now, according to reports in Team Talk and in a number of other publications down here in England, Everton are reportedly holding a concrete interest in Rangers striker Hamza Igman and are now favourites to sign him this summer. Now, the Everton are expected to splash the cash this summer with the money from the Friedkin Group that they get, not having splashed a massive amount in the past. David Moyes apparently sees Hamza Igman as his top number 9 target, and Everton are looking for a striker. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, their current striker, his contract expires in June, so obviously barring him signing an extension, he will leave on a free transfer. Hamza Igman is one of the top targets for Everton. And, even though Rangers can demand a substantial fee for the player, given the fact that Everton have money now and do have substantial amounts of money from the Friedkin Group, it's not thought that fee would be prohibitive to an English Premier League club. The fee is thought to be, the offer from Everton is thought to be in excess of £20 million for Hamza. Look, the fact, we paid 2.5 million for him, and as much as I would hate to see Hamza leave, and I genuinely would hate to see Hamza leave, I'd love to have another season of Hamza, another season of, seeing what Hamza can achieve. I do believe there is an element that would say that if a bid of over 20 million comes in, that we would struggle to turn that down. And obviously that money then could be reinvested into the playing squad, which would give you 40 to 45 million pounds to spend on players, which, is mad. So, if this interest, which does seem very true and very concrete, is followed up by Everton, I think we're going to face a fight to hang on to Hamza this summer. And obviously, the pull of the Premier League is there. Most players around the world dream of playing in the English Premier League. It is the biggest league in the world. It is the best league in the world, in terms of competition levels. So, and that's where the money is. And, as much as we all love Rangers, as much as we would all love our players to stay forever and ever, we've got to kind of recognise that the EPL is the big draw, isn't it? It is the biggest draw around. So, look, Hamza could well be on the move. He could leave. And, look, if we were to lose Hamza and Cerny this summer, I think it would be pretty bad. And, it would really leave two massive holes in the team that do need to be addressed and will need to be addressed this summer. I would say right wing is already a position that needs to be addressed. I'd say striker. I'd say, I'd say we could do with a couple of strikers, to be perfectly honest with you, because none of our outside of Hamza, none of our strikers are massively reliable, either in consistently scoring goals or consistently being fit enough to play. So I would say that, a couple of strikers would be something we do need to look at this summer. A lot obviously depends on if the takeover obviously finalises, and if the takeover does finalise, who becomes the new manager, who becomes the new sporting director, will of course have an influence over, which players are signed and which players are allowed to leave this summer. So, there is that to mix in as well. So I think, it's still all to play for in terms of who stays, who goes. But, these two stories that are emerging around Vaslav and around Hamza are not great. And, putting a bit of a dampener on what's been a pretty, positive week for the club so far. And I certainly hope that, when push comes to shove, when everything boils down to it, that a deal for Vaslav can be secured and Hamza can stay for at least another season. That's my ambition. That's my hope for Rangers. Look, that's the playing side of things. And look, I think, no matter what, there's got to be, I think, a growing sense of optimism for Rangers for the future. No matter what happens with Vaslav Cerny this summer, and obviously whether we're able to sign him and whether we're able to retain, obviously, Hamza Igman, you've got to have a sense of excitement about what is to come under a new owner, a new manager, a new sporting director, and new players that will obviously be brought in this summer. Right, let's go back to that banner, the non-racist, non-discriminatory banner. There's been some interesting stuff out there, and I've looked into it. I've read stuff up. I watched a video the other day. It was a fantastic video. I can't remember the guy's name now. Brilliant video, absolutely brilliant video. 10-minute moan. I can't remember. Craig Houston, is it? Was it Craig Houston? Yeah, I watched the Craig Houston video the other day. That's it, Craig Houston, inside the Rangers Stadium ban that has everyone talking. Fantastic video. Check it out if you haven't done so. Which he revealed that apparently Police Scotland have looked into that banner. Now, we all know that Scotland has pretty draconian hate speech laws, much stiffer than the ones that are down here in England. Although, I'm sure with Keir Starmer we'll soon be having, if you say to a Labour MP, you'll probably get arrested in the near future. But Craig Houston in his video talked about the fact that obviously there's lifetime bans that are being offered by the club for these people, and offered the theory. I mean, it is kind of a conspiracy theory that the old board that hopefully are on their way out very soon are looking to get revenge on the Union Bears for those banners that were held up against the present board. Although I've got to say, the banners that were held up by the Union Bears that, basically said Douglas Park, Graham Park, fuck off, I think were pretty much spot on. We all know the Park family are an absolute disease to this club and are killing the club. And the sooner they're gone, the better. I hate the Park family. But at the end of the day, they've said he put this down to possible a revenge mission. This is why the lifetime bans. And I agree, the lifetime bans for holding a banner or for making a banner or for whatever is pretty extreme. And, as he said on the video, you've got to be kind of thinking, well, how do you apportion blame on this banner? Do you say that it's the person who held it or the person who made it or the person who came up with the idea? Where does it stop? And we all know at football games, people have turned and said, oh, can you just hold this for me for a minute? And you hold it because you stood there and you don't necessarily know what you're holding. So, I think you've got to be really careful with this. Now, Police Scotland apparently have looked into the banner and they've said that there are no criminal charges to answer on that banner, as it is not hate speech. It is not criminal. It is not racist in any way, shape or form. Now, what's incredible to me is if the police are coming out and saying that this banner is not discriminatory, this banner is not racist, it does not breach any hate crime laws, then quite how UEFA have the right or the gall to sit there in their shiny offices in Switzerland or wherever they are and say that this banner is racist and discriminatory is absolutely beyond me. So the police are saying that it's not racist, it's not discriminatory, there's no hate speech, there is no crime to answer on this. Yet UEFA are saying it is. So who's right? Police Scotland, the police who established the laws of this country, or UEFA? Now we know UEFA as Simon Jordan. I mean, another one. I don't know if you've watched the Simon Jordan interview that was on Talk Sport, where he brands UEFA hypocrites. And he's right, the UEFA are hypocrites. He says that if you carry a Pride flag or a BLM flag or a Palestinian flag, you are absolutely fine. You can get away with that. That's not an issue. You can even hold We Hate Israel banners and get away with it. They show Israel the red card banner that was held by Celtic at a recent Champions League game and no action was taken against them. None at all. Double standards of the highest order. And Simon Jordan was right. The moment UEFA want to get involved in politics and politics that is perceivably discriminatory against certain groups, it's fine. We've all got to abide by the rainbow flag or the BLM flag. We've all got to take a knee or we're racists, and that's fine. But the moment we want an opinion as fans or we say anything as fans, as Simon Jordan says, it's sit down, shut up and it's got nothing to do with you. Fans as customers, and that's what we are at the end of the day, are treated like shite by UEFA and to some degree by Rangers as well. I mean, for me, Rangers are in danger of becoming the most woke club in the world. I think Rangers personally should have stood up to UEFA and said, well, explain to us how that banner is racist. How is it discriminatory? What about it is racist? And then obviously, they can refer to the evidence from Police Scotland. The police even say that it isn't racist. Now, handing out a life ban for someone for holding or making or whatever it is, a banner that is not racist, that is not discriminatory and does not break hate crime laws, I think puts Rangers on very, very dodgy ground. And, I think that this could end up in the courts. This could end up in a new number of sources, in a number of areas that could actually be really detrimental to the club. both on the public relations front and obviously on the financial front. So, I think the club have been really, really stupid, and I think it is a bit of a vendetta by the board against certain individuals, within the fan base. And as Craig Houston said, the fact that the board coming out and saying, which it is the board, and it is Patrick Stewart, who is an absolute tool, coming out and saying, this is, that if you associate yourself with this, we don't want you supporting our club. Well, piss off, it's not your actual club, so do one, mate. So look, at the end of the day, I still think there's a lot to run in this. I think there's a lot of, I think the club have acted absolutely disgracefully. I think they've been absolutely disgusting in this incident and how they've handled it. I think that it's shameful. It's shameful. And yeah, I know. I get that we have to abide by UEFA laws, and I understand that. And I've said all along that politics should be kept out of sport. But what you want is a fairness. And you want a fairness of approach by UEFA, so that if we get a 25, 30, 40 grand fine and we get a 2-year suspended stand closure for that banner, then Celtic should get the same for their banner, whichever club it is. And, Simon Jordan was right about one thing. He said yesterday that if this was Real Madrid, if this was Inter Milan, if this was, one of the big powerhouse clubs in Europe, UEFA wouldn't dare say a thing to them. They would just be little mice in the corner squeaking and saying nothing. It's Rangers, and we are a massive club, of course, but we don't hold the same powers as a Barcelona and Liverpool and Arsenal, Manchester City, Real Madrid. So it is double standards, massive double standards. But, away from that, my bone of contention now is, yes, we obviously have to abide by UEFA's laws. So please, no more banners, no more pyros, no more throwing anything. But I think the club have acted in a shabby manner. I think the club have acted in a very bad manner. And I think to ban people for life for this is absolutely massively in excess. It's out of order. It's ridiculous. Now, according to reports that have come out, the number of people that could be banned for life could be over 30 people that could be banned for life for this. And this is something that, not only affects you from not being able to watch your football team, but also affects your life as well, if you've got a banning order in place against you. So, I think the club need to think before they act. And I think they've massively overreacted on this situation. Massively overreacted. Guys, let me know your thoughts on the 3 topics we've covered in this morning's video. Thank you for watching. As always, guys, on the way out, please smash that sub, comment, like, and share. And look, if you don't agree with me on the ban, please obviously explain why. If you think the ban is racist, please tell me why the police are wrong and you're right. And also, please tell me, if these people are getting life bans, why you think that's right, that someone would be banned for life for this, and how you'd actually find the person responsible. And it would be just the one person that's responsible, or the little group that's actually organised it, or would it be anybody that held it, or would it be anybody who stood near it? What would be the rules for it? It's a very difficult situation. Thank you for watching. Please remember always, we are the people.